Hi there. Alright, so my name's Tristan and I'm from Computers for Kids. This is going to be a very basic Scratch tutorial. I'm no Scratch professional at all. I've created a couple of Scratch lessons, so I do understand, relatively understand the interface and stuff, but if there's anything really advanced that you want to learn to do with Scratch, then I do recommend looking at the Scratch forums or doing a little bit of research, Googling yourself to figure it out. But I will show you the basics and especially like the user interface of Scratch. So right now we're using the Scratch application that you can actually download and install on your computer, but you can also just use Scratch online. The link is, I think it's mit.scratch.edu, something like that, or just Google Scratch and you find it. But yeah, so this is just the one that you actually download to your computer, but it's the same as the Scratch interface online. I just prefer using this version. Okay, so there's a couple of important areas to look at. The first kind of important area is your coding section over here. Well, it's actually broken down, and you can just click on any of these categories over here and it will take you to it automatically, or you can just scroll down this list and you can find it. The other things are costumes, sounds. Then on the right side of your screen here, you get sprites. Now a sprite is like a character, or it could be pretty much anything that you want to interact with. It's very versatile, so it's basically anything that you want to code and you want to move around, or you want to be this little character, move around and pick up something. Those are all going to be under this thing called like a sprite. And you can add more sprites by going down here, and if you can custom make sprites if you want to, or you can find a sprite that's built into Scratch, or you can upload a sprite, but I'll show you that a little bit more in depth in a moment. So those are sprites. They're very versatile, and you'll see for some of our lessons, like I'll pop up one of the lessons that we made recently and you'll see how we use sprites in that. And then also where it says stage, you get backdrops. Now backdrops are the background. So in this little block over here, you can see it's just currently white at the moment, and this is our sprite over here, the Scratch cat. If you click on backdrops, it changes some of the blocks. So you don't have any motion blocks on backdrops. You can see it just says stage selected, no motion blocks. So it does cancel out some of the things because a backdrop is not going to be moving. It's just like the background for this over here. And just like with the sprite, you can upload a backdrop, so you can upload like a custom image. You can surprise what would just pick one from the backdrop, so it's included into Scratch, or you can click on paint and you can make your own backdrop in Scratch. But yeah, so let's start with that. So I'm going to click on paint for backdrops, and this is where you can create some kind of backdrop. So I'm just going to make something very basic just so I can show you. And you can see as soon as I make a backdrop or like add a color to it or something like that, it immediately changes everything. And the Scratch editor is actually pretty intuitive. It works like a lot of graphic design programs, so it's actually quite nice. But yeah, so that's our backdrop. And now to the backdrop, we can actually add, you can actually add different blocks to it as well. Alright, now sprites, because basically I want to show you this more than backdrops really. Now sprites are where you do the majority of your coding. You also get these two blocks up here, what is go and stop, and I'll show you how that comes into play with coding. So if you want to start with, just say we want to create like a basic movement controls for our character. So just say we want to use like our arrow keys on our keyboard, or like our WAS and D keys to move around our character. We can do that by using a couple of blocks. I'm just going to get the blocks for now, and then we'll start putting them together. But you want to start with when the green flag is clicked, it executes code below it. Now there's different events that can happen. Events are triggers in Scratch. So an event will trigger something to happen in Scratch. So for example, us clicking go will trigger anything attached to this over here, and that's what we will do for now. And then in one of the lessons we already made, I'll show you how we use different things to trigger different events in Scratch. So we're going to start with this block, and then if you attach something to that block, it will kind of glue it together and then execute that underneath. So for example, if I have just move 10 steps attached to that and click go, our character will move 10 on the x-axis. But we obviously want to have, you know, some form of movement. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the control command section over here, and you use this a lot. So what we want to do is we first want to put a forever, and then you can wrap different blocks into a forever tag. So what happens is with forever is when you click this, anything within here will continue forever. So per se, if I put in move 10 steps and I click go, our character will keep doing that forever until we click the stop button. Now obviously our character is completely off of screen. So this little section over here I can actually show you now, where it says sprite, like the actual just sprite, and then it's got a name. That's the name for this character. So if we just say test1, it will rename our sprite to like whatever we input over here. And the X and the Y are the X axis and the Y axis on here. So X plus or X positive moves our character to the right. X minus or X negative moves our character to the left. Y positive or Y plus moves up. Y negative or Y minus moves downwards. I'm just going to put it back to 0, just so we can get our character back into the middle of our screen at 0, 0. Direction points our character in a different way, so you can actually like move this thing around and it'll point our character in a different direction. But I'm just going to leave it at 90, because we don't need it to be in a different direction. The size over here actually scales the size of the character. So anything above or below 100 will scale down the character, and anything above 100 will scale up the character. Or pretty much anything from 0 upwards will scale up, and anything from a figure downwards will scale down the character. This over here, the little eye, just basically toggles our view of our sprite on or off. And yeah, I also forgot to mention that we are on the sprite at the moment to do this. So I'm going to wrap this forever in an if then. Now what happens is this little open space over here that actually allows you to put in something. So it allows you to put in anything that has like this kind of like a triangle style over here that can fit into there. So if our character, or if a key of just say up arrow is pressed, then we're going to move 10 steps. Okay, now we're moving 10 steps on the x-axis at the moment, right? So we're going to move that way. Now if I do the same and I'm going to duplicate this block and I'm going to paste it below the other block, so it's still within the forever but it's under the if then, I'm going to change this to down, sorry, not to down arrow but to left arrow, and this should actually be on right arrow. So right is going to move our character, when we click it's going to move our character 10 steps that way, but then we actually want to make this go the opposite direction, so I'm going to put in minus 10 rather. And now you can see we have like a basic movement. So I'm clicking right arrow on my keyboard and it's moving our character to the right, and left arrow is moving our character to the left. Okay. So now if we want to move our character upwards, we're just going to be doing the same thing, but we're going to be using something a little bit different now. So instead of using the move and the move steps, sorry for the noise, instead of using the move steps, we can actually rather use these change X and change Y. Now, why I said earlier on that X is, you know, positive X is to the right, negative X is to the left, and Y up is positive and Y down is negative. Because when coming to, you know, coding up and down movement, what we can do is that we can actually use our change Y, change X, sorry, and change Y. Change X by 10 is the same as moving 10 steps. So if we place it under there, we'll move 10 steps on the x-axis, and if we go and make this now a negative, so we take another one and make this negative now, it will do the exact same thing that we did earlier on. So now it's still going to move on the x-axis the entire time, and that's the same as using move 10 steps. Per se, we want our character to be able to move up and down as well. I'm going to change this, and I'm going to remove X because X is only horizontal and Y is vertical. Now if I put in Y under there, and I put in the same thing over here, but I change it to down arrow and make a negative, we now have we have right, left, up and down movement. Okay, now that's all going on the X and Y axis. That's why the X and Y axis is actually pretty like you need to kind of understand the concept of it, because it helps a lot with understanding how to move your character around and how to do things with Scratch. So that's our basics of our character movement, and I'm not going to do anything more advanced than that. I'm just showing you how things link together. And so what's happening here is that we have an event of this being triggered. So when we click go, then we have, what is this called again? We have a control of forever. Then within that control, we have another control of if then. So if this key is pressed, then this must happen. And the same for all of those ones as well. So it starts becoming pretty intuitive when you start understanding, like, if you want something to happen, then something needs to happen afterwards. And yeah, I've been playing around with this and kind of just learning the basics of Scratch will help a lot. But that's our first little bit of code, and now we've made a character be able to move around quite nicely. Now with the backdrops, I'm just going to show you quickly like a basic animation of a backdrop. And then we'll just pop into one of our lessons so I can show you how to do that. So per se, we can actually change, like a color of a backdrop, or set the color or something along these lines here. So if we had, two different backdrops, so if I go to backdrop and I just simply duplicate this, and I rather change the color to something else. Let me just actually just go over that one quickly, like that. Sorry, I actually forgot to say that you can change colors by clicking this fill over here, and it just works on a RGB or HSL, so hue, saturation, and brightness. So the hue is going to be what color, like where in the color spectrum you are. Saturation will tell you how bright the color is. How saturated that color is, and the brightness will change, obviously how bright that color is. So the lower the value of the brightness, the darker it gets. The higher value, the more it goes to white. The saturation, same situation, but the lower it goes, the least saturated it becomes, and the higher it goes, the more saturated it becomes. And you can just go between that, and then any of these over here, like creating blocks, there's squares over here, there's circles as well, so you can create circles if you want to. And there's always a midpoint, but it's really nice as well. But per se, now we have a little circle where our Scratch character is. Now I wanted to just show you like a real basic animation with backdrops. So now we're in the backdrop over here, and you'll know that when you're in the backdrop section, because you won't have any motion blocks over here. And now what we can do is we can find an event to trigger something, and we can actually have it change. So from the get-go, we can have it on our regular backdrop, and then as soon as you click go, it will change our backdrop as well. So I mean, those are like the kind of basics of using Scratch when it comes to putting things together. You're always going to have something trigger an event, and it could be through multiple things. So you even have keys being pressed you can trigger an event. When something's clicked, you can trigger an event as well. When backdrops change, you can trigger an event. When a sound gets louder than something, you can trigger an event, or even time. Or when you receive broadcast messages. So it's very important that you start learning like what needs to happen. Again, you always need something to trigger something, and then this section of your controls what it gets and how it triggers. And then you have motion blocks. If you click on Scratch, anything with or Sprite, anything with motion fits into this section over here. So that's anything to do with movement controls, or anything along those lines. Anything with looks, you can animate, like text to come into the world. So you can just click that over there, and place it under the bottom there, or you can place on top here. So when you click this, it will say hello for 2 seconds. You can type in whatever you want there. So you can just become creative and just start playing around with some other blocks. You can even have the thing play sound if you want to, etc. So again, it's all just about playing around and about learning what these blocks do, and that will help you a lot. But that's just the basics of the Scratch interface. I think I should have covered everything. Besides the top over here, these buttons over here just basically just make full screen right sidebar, or like a smaller variation of the right sidebar. Go and stop, very important, because most of the time you're going to have to click go and have something trigger when you click go. And if you want to save this project online, it automatically saves all the time, but if you do want to save it, you can click File, Save to your computer, and that will save it. Alright, so that's the general overview of Scratch, and again, it's just a little bit of practice to get to kind of just keep putting things together, so you can kind of just learn through that way, because that will be the best way to learn, basically. Anyway, hope this helps. Thank you very much.